guys, welcome back to another Android Studio tutorial. In today's episode we are going to learn about how to create a bind service by using Messenger. So if you're using the binder class to create a bound service, you have to make sure that your service and the component which is binded to the service within the same process, otherwise it will not work. And if you want to place your service in a remote process, you have to use a messenger. So this is how the Android system will achieve inter-process communication through services. So in this case, there is no public methods are available on the service. Instead, the client will send some commands to the service and the service will do the work. So the client will send the commands in the form of a message object. Okay, so here I am going to create a simple Android application that will demonstrate how to create a bind service by Messenger. So here we have three buttons. First button is for bind the service and other two buttons for do some work. Now we have to create a new service. So right click the package and create a new Java class. Name the class as my service. Click OK. Now extends service. Now override the needed method. Only one method is needed, which is the onBind method. Click OK. Now we have to create another class that extends the handler. So class incoming handler extends handler. Now you need to override a method called handle message. So in this case, each message from the client is received on this method handle message. On this method handle message. So you have to done the work on this method. So now here I am going to make the work. So before going to make any work, here I am going to create some static variables. Static final int job1 initialize with some value 1. Now create another variable static final int job2 with some other integer values. Okay, so here the client communicate with the service by sending some commands. So the first thing we have to identify which command is actually sent by the client. So here I am going to use a switch case statement. So add a switch case statement. Now we have to identify the command by using the what member of the message object. So msg dot what. Now we have to identify each of the commands sent by the client. So the first command is if the command is equal to job1, we have to make the job1. So here display some message get application context hello from job1. Now specify the length and finally make the toast visible using show method. Add the break statement. Okay, now we have to add the second case. If it is equal to job2, we have to done job2. So copy these statements, paste it here, hello from job2. Okay, also add another default block. In the default case, call the super method. Okay, so now we have a class called incoming handler that extends handler. Now we have to create an object of messenger. So here I am going to create an object of messenger. So messenger, I name it as m messenger equal to new messenger and make it as instance of the handler. new incoming handler. Okay, now we have to return this messenger from the onBind method. So by using the messenger object, the client can send some command to the service in the form of a message object. So now from this iBinder, here I am going to return the messenger object, return mmessenger. Sorry, you have to call another method called getBinder. This will return an object of mmessenger. There is some mistake. No, nothing. Okay, so here display some message using a toast toast.make toast get application context service binding. Now specify length for the toast.length long, and finally make it visible. Okay, now we finish the coding on the service. Now we have to bind the service to the activity. So go to the main activity.java. So on the XML file we have 3 buttons, and we have some onClick method called bind service, say hello, and only one method, say hello. I use the same method for these 2 buttons. Okay, so go to the main activity.java. So first thing, we have to create an object of service connection to manage the communication between the activity and the service. So here I am going to create private service connection. I name it as mConnection equal to new service connection. Okay, so we got the iBinder object on this method, on service connected method. So now we have to create an object of messenger here. So create an object of messenger, I name it as mmessenger, and initialize this with the null. So for the binding status of the service, create some boolean value. Boolean is bind, and initialize it with the false. Okay, so now we have to initialize the messenger object. Here I am going to initialize the messenger object within the onService connected method. So mmessenger equal to new messenger, and pass the iBinder object, iBinder argument. Here the argument is service. Pass that value. Okay, so now we initialize the messenger object. Now make the boolean value is bind into true. Okay, so now we have to bind to the service. So now whenever user click the bind service button, we have to bind the service to the activity. So go to the bind service method, and first we have to create an object of intent. Name it as intent equal to new indent this, and the class of the service. Here the class is myService dot class. Okay, now we have to bind the service. So bind service, first you have to pass the indent object, indent. Second argument, you have to pass the service connection object. Here it is mConnection. Now a flag is needed, so context dot, and use this flag bind auto create. Okay, now we successfully bind to the service. Now we have to make the work. So whenever user click the button say hello and say hello again, this method will invoke. So the first thing, we have to identify which button is clicked by the user. Before that, here under method onService disconnected, this method will invoke if the service is crashed or the Android system will stop the service. So in this case we have to reset the object. So mmessenger equal to null, Also make the is bind into false. Okay. So finally we have to unbind the service from the activity. So here I override the one of the lifecycle method of the activity on stop. In this method here I am going to unbind the service. So unbind service and pass the service connection object. Also make is bind into false. Also messenger equal to null. Reset all the values. Okay, so now we have to do the job. So go to the say hello method. So here we using a messenger to communicate with the service. So in this case there is no public methods are available on the service. Instead the client will send some command to the service in the form of a message object. So the first thing we have to identify which button is clicked by the user. So for that here create another string value, string button text. Okay, so button text equal to the view object. It is a button, so cast it into button dot get text. Okay, I think we need to typecast this one into string. Cast it into string. Okay, now if the text is equal to, if the text dot equals say hello, that means the user click the first button. Otherwise else if the button text dot equals say hello again, that is the second button. Okay, here we need some double quotes. Okay, so before make the communication with the service we need to identify whether the service is already binded or not. So before make all this job, add some if loop. If the service is already bind, we have to do the job, otherwise bind the service first. Okay, so else ask the user to bind the service. Toast dot make a toast, get application context, bind service first, and specify the length into long, and finally make it visible using show method. Okay, so the first thing we have to create a message object and we have to pass the message object to the service using the messenger object. So if the user click the first button, that means say hello button, we have to do the first job. So first we have to create a message object, message equal to message dot and call the method obtain. First here I pass null value. Second you need to pass the command. Here the command is get from the service itself my service dot it is job1, that is the command. Also you have to pass some more arguments. Okay, now you need to pass this message to the service using messenger. So messenger dot call the send method and pass the message. Of course you need to add some try catch block, surround it with some try catch. Okay, so now we do the first job, now we have to done the second job. So copy these things, message and the try catch block, and paste it here. on the second button, and here the job is job 2, the second job. Okay, so now we finish the coding. Now we have to add the service into the manifest. So open the Android manifest.xml and add a new service with the name my service. Okay, now I finish the coding. Now here I am going to run the application. Okay, now here we have the application available on the virtual device. First I click the button say hello. So first we have to bind the service. So I click the bind service button. Now the service is binded to the activity, and here I am going to click the first button, hello from job 1. This is the first job on the service, and click the second button. This is the second job from the service. I hope you understand the concepts. Thank you for watching. See you in the next episode.